The sensor arrays had been humming their usual monotonous rhythm for 3 years without incident. Ryla checked the displays with the practiced disinterest of someone who had seen nothing but empty space and stellar dust for far too long. The Outer Rim monitoring station orbited a dead star system that nobody cared about, which made it the perfect place to watch for things that shouldn't exist. The first anomaly appeared as a slight distortion in the gravitational field readings. Ryla frowned and tapped the display, assuming dust interference or a calibration error. The number didn't change. It grew larger. She pulled up the backup sensors and ran a comparison. Both systems showed the same impossible reading. "Commander Orin," she called across the operations center, "I'm getting something strange on the deep space array." Orin didn't look up from his report. "Define strange." "Gravitational distortion equivalent to a small moon," Ryla said, "except it's moving at 0.3 light speed." That got his attention. Orin crossed the room in 4 quick strides and leaned over her console. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to something approaching fear. "Run a full diagnostic," he ordered. "Check every sensor in the network." Ryla's fingers flew across the controls. The diagnostic came back clean. The sensors were functioning perfectly, which meant the readings were real. "Commander, I'm picking up 17 similar signatures, all moving in formation, all showing mass readings that don't make sense." Orin's face had gone pale. He grabbed the emergency transmitter and opened a direct channel to Coalition Central Command. "This is Outer Rim Station 47. We have a priority alert. I repeat, priority alert. Unknown objects detected, massive scale, multiple contacts, requesting immediate confirmation from adjacent stations." The response came faster than Ryla had ever seen. Within minutes, every monitoring station within 100 light-years was reporting the same phenomenon. The emergency network lit up with frantic transmissions, confused voices overlapping as station commanders tried to make sense of what their instruments were telling them. High Arbitrator Ven received the consolidated report in his council chamber on the capital world. He read it twice. Certain there had been a translation error. The numbers couldn't be right. Nothing that large could move through space. Nothing that massive could be built. The laws of physics and engineering made it impossible. "Get me Fleet Admiral Cross," Ven said to his aide, "immediately." Cross arrived within the hour, his uniform crisp despite the rushed summons. He studied the data with the calm efficiency of someone who had commanded fleets for 40 years. Then his calm evaporated. "This can't be accurate," he said. "These objects would be visible from neighboring systems. They'd show up on every sensor array in the sector." "They are showing up," Ven replied. "On every array, every station, every monitoring post we have. The readings are consistent across the entire network." Cross pulled up a tactical display and began running calculations. His expression grew darker with each passing moment. "If these measurements are correct, a single one of these objects masses more than our entire 7th Fleet. We're talking about vessels that are hundreds of kilometers in length." "Vessels," Ven repeated. "You think they're ships?" "They're in formation," Cross said grimly. "Moving with purpose and coordination. This isn't a natural phenomenon. Someone built these things, and they're heading toward Coalition space." The Emergency Council convened within hours. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered via holographic link. The chamber buzzed with frightened voices and wild speculation. Some called for immediate military mobilization. Others insisted the readings must be wrong. A few suggested diplomatic outreach, though no one knew how to contact something they couldn't understand. Ven called for order and the chamber fell silent. "We are facing an unknown threat of unprecedented scale," he said, his voice steady despite the fear he felt. "Fleet Admiral Cross will coordinate our military response, but first we need information. We need to know what we're dealing with." Cross transmitted orders across the Coalition fleet network. Every available warship was to converge on the projected intercept coordinates. Reconnaissance vessels equipped with advanced sensors were to make first contact and gather intelligence. The largest military mobilization in 4,000 years began within minutes. The reconnaissance group consisted of 12 fast cruisers, each carrying the coalition's most advanced scanning equipment. They jumped to hyperspace and emerged at the calculated position 3 days later. Their sensors immediately detected the objects, much closer now, much clearer. Captain Dane commanded the lead reconnaissance vessel. He had served in the fleet for 20 years without ever firing a weapon in anger. The coalition had been at peace for so long that war was something discussed in history classes, not something anyone expected to actually experience. His sensor officer gasped, "Captain, visual confirmation, I'm putting it on screen." The main display activated and every person on the bridge stopped breathing. The object that filled their view was beyond comprehension. It stretched across the void like a small world, vast and dark and utterly alien. Its surface was smooth and metallic, marked with structures that might have been cities or weapons or something else entirely. Lights glowed in regular patterns across its hull, suggesting active power systems and occupied spaces. "Get me dimensions," Dane ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. 340 kilometers from bow to stern, the sensor officer reported. "Width approximately 60 kilometers, height 40 kilometers. Captain, our entire ship could fit inside one of its engine ports." Dane opened a communication channel and broadcast on all standard frequencies. "Unknown vessel. This is Coalition Reconnaissance Group 7. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Silence answered him. The massive ship simply hung in space, waiting, lights pulsing steadily along its impossible length. Behind it, 16 more signatures appeared on sensors, each one just as large, each one moving with patient inevitability toward the heart of coalition space. The reconnaissance group held position, afraid to approach, afraid to retreat. They waited for orders that took hours to arrive because even at faster-than-light communication speeds, the distances were vast. When the orders finally came, they were simple: maintain observation, gather all possible data, and under no circumstances provoke a response. So they watched and waited and tried not to think about what would happen when those ships reached populated systems, tried not to calculate how many billions of lives hung in the balance, tried not to imagine what kind of civilization could build something so massive and send it across the galaxy with such casual confidence. 12 hours of tense silence passed before the massive vessel finally responded. Captain Dane had nearly given up hope when his communication officer jerked upright. "Captain, incoming transmission, audio only, translating now." The voice that emerged from the speakers was warm and curious, with an accent that the translation software struggled to process. "Hello there. This is Captain Henry Walsh of the colony ship New Horizon. We're reading your position and wanted to make sure you're not having navigational difficulties. Do you need any assistance?" Every person on the bridge exchanged confused glances. The casual friendliness was so disconnected from the threatening scale of the vessel that it created a surreal cognitive dissonance. Dane cleared his throat. "Captain Walsh, this is Coalition Reconnaissance Group 7. We are operating normally. May we inquire about your destination and purpose in Coalition space?" "Oh, wonderful," Walsh replied, sounding genuinely pleased. "We're actually looking for information about colonization opportunities. We have 17 colony ships in this convoy, and we're hoping to establish settlements on suitable worlds. We've been traveling for quite a while, and our people are eager to find new homes." Dane muted his microphone and looked at his crew. Did he just say colony ships? These are civilian vessels. His science officer pulled up the latest sensor data. "Captain, I'm detecting massive internal structures, what appear to be residential districts, agricultural sections. The power signature is consistent with fusion reactors designed for long-term habitation rather than military operations." Dane unmuted. "Captain Walsh, our sensors indicate your vessel is approximately 340 kilometers in length. Can you confirm these measurements?" A pause, then laughter. "Your scanners are working fine. New Horizon is actually a bit longer than that if you include the extended agricultural pods. We needed the space for sustainable farming to support the population during the journey. How many people are aboard your ship? Dane asked carefully. Currently about 2 million, Walsh answered. We started with slightly more, but we've had births and deaths over the years. It all balances out. The number hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. 2 million people on a single vessel. The largest coalition ship could barely support 10,000, and this was just one of 17. Dane did the math in his head and felt his stomach drop. The humans had brought more people in this convoy than lived on some coalition worlds. Captain Walsh, Dane said, we need to request that you halt your advance while we coordinate with our government. This is unprecedented contact, and we have protocols to follow. Of course, Walsh said agreeably. We understand completely. First contact situations require careful handling. We'll maintain position and await your instructions. Oh, and we're transmitting our complete technical specifications and historical database if you'd like to review them. Transparency helps build trust. The data package arrived seconds later. It was massive, containing detailed schematics, population records, cultural information, and historical archives going back thousands of years. Coalition intelligence officers would spend months analyzing it all, but the immediate technical data was enough to cause panic. Dr. Tess Abrams led the scientific analysis team aboard the Coalition research vessel that arrived 6 hours later. She had 3 advanced degrees in xenotechnology and had studied alien artifacts for most of her career. Nothing in her education had prepared her for what she was seeing. The engineering is insane, she told the assembled leadership via holographic conference. They built this ship in space over 60 years using modular construction techniques. Entire generations of workers lived and died during the construction process. The vessel isn't just a ship, it's a mobile nation. High Arbitrator Venn leaned forward. What about military capability? That's the strange part, Abrams said. The ship has defensive systems, certainly. Anything this large would need point defense against asteroids and debris. But the power systems are optimized for life support and manufacturing, not weapons. If they wanted to build a warship, they did it wrong. Or they're hiding the weapons, suggested General Dorian Vex, who had joined the conference. A ship that size could have entire weapon batteries concealed inside. Possible, Abrams admitted, but unlikely. The internal structure is too focused on civilian infrastructure. I'm seeing schools, hospitals, parks, entertainment districts. This is a city that happens to travel through space. Counselor Shira studied the data with growing unease. Why would anyone build something this large for civilian purposes? It's incredibly inefficient. They could transport the same number of people in 100. Smaller ships for a fraction of the resources. I think that's the key question, Abrams said. Why do they build big? What drives this engineering philosophy? I've been analyzing their historical records, and I'm finding references to psychological factors. Something about humans having difficulty adapting to small, enclosed spaces for extended periods. The conference continued for hours as more data was analyzed and more questions emerged without answers. The humans were friendly, cooperative, and completely oblivious to the panic they had caused. They responded to every inquiry with helpful detail, volunteered information freely, and seemed genuinely confused when asked about their military intentions. Ambassador Lena Cross arrived from Earth on a faster courier ship. She was young, energetic, and seemed baffled by the Coalition's concern. I'm not sure I understand the problem, she said during her first meeting with Counselor Shira. We're colonists. We're looking for empty worlds to settle. We have no interest in Coalition territory. Your ships are the size of small moons, Shira said carefully. You must understand how that appears to us. Cross blinked. Oh, I suppose that does seem large, but you have to understand. Humans need space, psychological space. We spent most of our history confined to one planet, and it made us a bit claustrophobic as a species. These ships let us carry our homes with us. They're designed for comfort during long journeys. "How long have you been traveling?" Shira asked. "This convoy left Earth about 30 years ago," Cross said. "Some of our colony ships have been in transit for over a century. It takes time to cross the distances between stars, and we want our people to live full lives during the journey, not just survive in cramped quarters." Shira processed this information, trying to reconcile the threat assessment with the casual explanation. "Ambassador Cross, you must realize that your arrival has caused significant concern. Your ships represent force projection beyond anything the Coalition has ever encountered." Cross's expression shifted to one of genuine distress. "Force projection? No, that's not what we're about at all. We're just looking for new homes. Earth is overcrowded, and we have this deep cultural need to spread out, to make sure that if something happens to one world, humanity survives on others. It's not about conquest, it's about survival." "Then why bring so many people?" Shira asked. "Why not send smaller expeditions?" "Because small expeditions fail," Cross said softly. "We learned that the hard way. You need enough people to build a complete society, enough genetic diversity, enough skills and knowledge, enough hope to sustain the difficult early years. These ships carry everything needed to establish thriving colonies, not just survival outposts." The conversation left Shira more confused than before. The humans seemed sincere. Their explanations made a certain kind of sense. But the threat remained. 17 massive vessels capable of incredible destruction, even if that wasn't their intended purpose. The Coalition would have to decide whether to trust these strange newcomers or prepare for the worst. The Coalition War Council assembled in a secure facility buried 3 kilometers beneath the capital world's surface. It had been built 4,000 years ago and never used. Now dust-covered corridors echoed with urgent footsteps as military commanders and political leaders converged for the first emergency session in living memory. Fleet Admiral Cross activated the central holographic display. 17 massive red icons appeared, each representing a human colony ship. Tactical projections showed various engagement scenarios. Every single one ended with devastating Coalition losses. "We cannot win a conventional conflict," he said without preamble. "Even if these are purely civilian vessels, their mass alone makes them nearly unstoppable. Ramming speed would devastate any fleet we send." Senator Karn slammed his hand on the table. "Then we strike first, destroy them before they reach population centers. We have weapons capable of cracking planets. Surely we can damage these ships." "At what cost?" Vice Admiral Tor asked quietly. "Each vessel carries 2 million civilians. We're talking about eliminating 34 million people. And for what? Because they built big ships." "Because they threaten our entire civilization," Karn shot back. "We've maintained peace for millennia by ensuring no single power could dominate. These humans appear, and suddenly the balance is shattered." Research Director Miles cleared his throat. "If I may, I've been analyzing the human transmissions our monitoring stations have intercepted. They're broadcasting constantly, entertainment programs, educational content, music, news reports. Everything suggests a thriving civilian culture." "Which could be deception," Karn argued. "Incredibly elaborate deception," Miles countered. "We're seeing children's programming, cooking shows, university lectures, sports competitions. The level of detail is extraordinary if it's all fake." High Arbitrator Venn raised his hand for silence. "Show us what you've found." Miles activated his data pad, and the holographic display shifted, showing intercepted human transmissions. A news broadcast discussed agricultural yields in the hydroponic sections. A documentary explained the ship's water recycling systems. A drama series followed families dealing with the challenges of multi-generational space travel. "This is their reality," Miles said. "They're not warriors preparing for conquest. They're people living their lives while traveling between stars. I've found references to schools graduating students who have never seen a planet, to elderly residents dying peacefully in the homes they've occupied for decades, to ongoing debates about allocation of park space and restaurant licensing." None of that matters if they decide to attack, Karn insisted. But it suggests they won't, Miles argued. Everything we're seeing indicates a culture focused inward, on maintaining their society during the journey, not on external threats or opportunities. The debate raged for hours, the council divided into factions, hawks demanding preemptive strikes, doves calling for diplomatic engagement, pragmatists trying to find middle ground. Meanwhile, intelligence services continued their analysis, building a picture of human society that was both fascinating and terrifying. On the human ships, life continued with blissful ignorance of the panic they had caused. Aboard New Horizon, students attended classes in vast educational complexes. Workers maintained the fusion reactors that powered the floating city. Families gathered in parks beneath artificial skies programmed to mimic Earth's day-night cycle. Captain Walsh reviewed the latest communication from the coalition, noting the delays in response and the careful phrasing of each message. "They're scared of us," he said to his first officer. "Can you blame them?" she replied. "We show up with the biggest ships they've ever seen. From their perspective, we must look like an invasion force." Walsh frowned. "We should probably address that directly, make it clear we're not a threat. Maybe invite some of their representatives aboard for a tour. Let them see what we actually are." The suggestion was transmitted to Ambassador Cross, who immediately proposed it to the coalition. Councillor Shira brought it before the council, where it sparked another heated debate. Eventually, caution won over curiosity. A small delegation would visit New Horizon, but military forces would remain on high alert. While diplomats argued and military forces maneuvered, ordinary coalition citizens became aware of the situation. News of the massive human vessels spread across the networks, spawning wild speculation and conspiracy theories. Some called for war, others welcomed the newcomers, most simply felt afraid of something they didn't understand. Ryla watched it all from her monitoring station. She had been the first to detect the humans, and now she felt a strange responsibility for what followed. She studied every piece of data about them, reading their transmissions, learning their language, trying to understand what kind of people built such enormous vessels. What she found surprised her. The humans were not conquerors or warriors. They were refugees from a crowded world, seeking space to breathe and grow. Their enormous ships were not weapons but arcs, designed to carry complete societies across the vast empty distances between stars. They built big because they feared being alone, because they needed the psychological comfort of numbers and space. But Ryla also found references that troubled her. Casual mentions of Earth's military fleet, much smaller vessels that had stayed behind. The colony ships were apparently the civilian fleet, which raised an uncomfortable question. If these were their civilian vessels, what were their military ships capable of? She compiled her findings into a report and transmitted it through channels, knowing it would likely be ignored in the chaos, but hoping someone would pay attention. The humans were not what the coalition feared, but they might be something more complex, more nuanced. They were people who had learned to think in planetary scales, who saw the galaxy as both opportunity and existential threat, who built with permanence because they refused to accept the fragility of single-world civilizations. The Coalition War Council reconvened after 72 hours of continuous analysis. Exhaustion showed on every face, but decisions had to be made. Fleet Admiral Cross presented the military's final assessment. "We have three options: attempt preemptive destruction, accept their presence and negotiate terms, or delay while we develop weapons capable of threatening them." "The first option is genocide," Vice Admiral Tor said flatly. 34 million civilians. "The second option is surrender," Karn replied. "We acknowledge them as the dominant power." "The third option is cowardice," Ven said quietly. "And it gains us nothing if they intend harm. Delay only gives them time to establish positions." He stood and faced the council. "We will engage diplomatically. We will send representatives to their ship. We will negotiate in good faith. But we will also maintain military readiness. If they prove hostile, we will fight. If they prove peaceful, we will welcome them. We will not strike first against civilians, but we will not be caught unprepared. The decision was made. Ambassador Cross received formal invitation to continue negotiations. Captain Walsh received permission to host coalition representatives, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if first contact would end in friendship or fire. The summit station materialized at the neutral coordinates, a small orbital platform hastily constructed from modular components. Coalition vessels formed a defensive perimeter while human ships waited at the agreed distance. Tension crackled through the void between them. Counselor Shira arrived with a full security detail, military advisors, and enough scanning equipment to analyze every molecule. She expected formal military protocols, armed guards, perhaps even veiled threats. What she got was 3 humans in comfortable casual clothing carrying gift baskets filled with food from their hydroponic gardens. Captain Walsh extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. "Counselor Shira, thank you for meeting with us. We brought some fresh vegetables, ship-grown, but quite good if I do say so myself." Shira accepted the basket automatically, too surprised to do anything else. The humans seemed genuinely delighted to be there, showing none of the tension that had consumed coalition leadership for weeks. They settled around the conference table. Walsh pulled out a data pad and began what could only be described as an enthusiastic presentation about colony opportunities. "We've analyzed several systems in the outer regions," Walsh explained, "planets that meet our habitability requirements. Good solar radiation, stable geology, adequate water. We're not picky about atmosphere since we can terraform over time. What we really need is space and resources." "Captain Walsh," Shira interrupted carefully, "we need to discuss your military capabilities." Walsh looked genuinely confused. "Military capabilities? You mean defensive systems? We have standard point defense arrays for asteroid deflection. Some of the colony ships have heavier weapons for clearing dangerous debris fields, but nothing designed for ship-to-ship combat. Why would we need that?" "Your vessels are 300 kilometers long," Shira said. "They represent incredible potential force projection." "They represent incredible potential housing," Walsh corrected gently. "Counselor, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. We're not a military expedition. We're families looking for new homes." Dr. Abrams activated the holographic display, showing the detailed scans of New Horizon. "Captain, can you explain why you built on such a massive scale? Our analysis suggests it's extremely inefficient compared to smaller modular designs." Walsh leaned back, considering. "That's actually a great question, and the answer goes back to early human space exploration. When we first started building space stations, we made them small, efficient, cramped, and people started having severe psychological problems, depression, anxiety, a condition we called space madness. We discovered that humans need psychological space, not just physical survival space." He pulled up images from human history, early space stations with tiny corridors and cramped quarters, medical reports documenting mental health crises, then later designs with open areas, parks, natural lighting. "We learned that if you want people to live in space long-term, not just survive but actually thrive, you need to give them room to breathe, room to feel like they're home rather than trapped in a metal box. So you built massive ships for mental health reasons," Admiral Tor said slowly. "Partly," Walsh agreed, "but also for practical reasons. These ships take decades to build and decades to reach their destinations. People are born here, grow up here, grow old here. We needed complete societies, not just transport vessels. New Horizon has schools, hospitals, entertainment districts, manufacturing facilities, research labs, everything a small city would have." "But surely you understand how threatening this appears," Shira pressed. "The Coalition has maintained peace through careful regulation of military capability. Your arrival shatters that balance." "Does it, though?" Ambassador Cross interjected. "We're not interested in Coalition space. We're heading toward unclaimed regions, empty systems far from your trade routes. We want worlds you've never even bothered surveying because they're too remote to be economically viable." Why leave Earth at all? Abrams asked. Why undertake such a massive exodus? The humans exchanged glances, something passing between them that spoke of shared understanding. Walsh spoke quietly. Because staying on one world forever felt like waiting to die, not as individuals, but as a species. Earth is beautiful, but it's also fragile. One asteroid, one plague, one ecological collapse, and everything we've ever been just ends. He pulled up images of Earth, a blue sphere against black void. For millions of years, humanity lived on that one world, all our dreams, all our potential, concentrated in one fragile place. When we finally reached space, we realized how alone we were, how vulnerable, every egg in one basket, and we couldn't accept that anymore. So these colony ships, Tor said, understanding dawning, they're not about conquest, they're about survival. They're about hope, Cross said. Hope that if something happens to Earth, humanity continues elsewhere. Hope that our children and their children will have new worlds to explore. Hope that we're not just a brief spark in cosmic darkness. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implications. The coalition had been preparing for war against refugees, against people driven by the same fear of extinction that motivated every sapient species. The humans weren't conquerors. They were survivors who refused to accept the vulnerability of single-world existence. "What about your military?" Shira asked. "The real military, not these colony ships." Walsh smiled ruefully. "You found those references, did you?" "Yes. Earth maintains a defense fleet, smaller ships, purpose-built for combat. They stayed behind to guard the homeworld, were colonists, counselor, not soldiers. We left the fighting ships with the fighters." "How large is this defense fleet?" demanded General Vex. "Classified," Walsh said apologetically, "but I can tell you they're nothing like the colony ships. Different design philosophy, different purpose. Earth's military thinks in terms of speed and firepower. We colonists think in terms of gardens and schools." Shira felt her threat assessment crumbling. "Captain Walsh, if your intentions are peaceful, why the secrecy about military capability?" "Would you tell a stranger everything about your defenses?" Walsh asked reasonably. "We're friendly, counselor, but we're not naive. We hope for the best but prepare for the worst. Earth taught us that lesson over and over throughout our history." The summit continued for hours, layers of misunderstanding gradually peeling away. The coalition representatives began to see the humans not as invaders but as immigrants, people seeking new lives far from crowded homes. Their massive ships were statements of hope rather than threats, mobile cities carrying complete societies toward distant dreams. But questions remained. If these were civilian vessels, what were the military ones capable of? If humans felt this threatened by single-world vulnerability, what else might they do to ensure survival? And most troubling, what had they left behind to guard Earth? What level of threat did they perceive that required such measures? High Arbitrator Venn received the summit report and read it 3 times. The humans were not what the coalition had feared, but they might be something more complicated, more dangerous in their desperation to survive, more unpredictable in their refusal to accept the galaxy's natural risks. The crisis was not over. It had merely transformed into something requiring different solutions, not military force but diplomatic nuance, not weapons but understanding. The galaxy was about to get much more crowded, and the coalition would have to decide whether to resist or adapt. Ryla had been analyzing sensors for 3 years. Now she walked through a residential district that was larger than her entire home station. Families lived in apartments with real windows looking out at artificial skies. Children played in parks where grass actually grew under simulated sunlight. Elderly residents tended gardens that had been cultivated for decades. "This section was completed about 40 years ago," her guide explained. A young woman named Bate who had been born on the ship. "My grandmother helped plant the first trees. She passed away last year, but her garden is still here. We maintain it in her memory." They passed a school where students learned about Earth history and colony survival skills. A medical center that would rival anything on coalition worlds. Manufacturing facilities producing everything from clothing to computer components. This was not a ship. It was a nation that happened to travel through space. Admiral Cross walked beside Counselor Shira through a different section, his military assessment crumbling with every step. "The internal structure is completely wrong for combat," he muttered. "Residential areas near the outer hull, critical systems spread across multiple decks. If someone wanted to build a warship this size, they would never design it like this." "So we believe them," Shira said. "They really are just colonists." "They're colonists who happen to build something terrifying," Cross replied. "But yes, I believe them. This ship is optimized for living, not fighting." Dr. Abrams interviewed engineers in the manufacturing sections, learning about construction techniques and maintenance procedures. "We build modular," one engineer explained. "Every major system has redundancy. We expect to travel for decades between stars. We can't afford single points of failure if something breaks. We need to manufacture replacements using materials we carry with us." "How do you deal with resource limitations?" Abrams asked. "Recycling," the engineer said. "We recycle everything: water, air, organic waste, metals. Nothing is wasted. The ship is essentially a closed ecosystem. What goes in must come back around. We've had 60 years to perfect the systems." Meanwhile, the coalition leadership convened to discuss practical matters. High Arbitrator Venn opened the session with a simple question: "What do we do now?" "We allocate colony worlds," Vice Admiral Tor said. "They want empty systems. We have thousands of surveyed planets that don't meet our economic criteria, too far from trade routes, too expensive to develop, perfect for people who build cities that can travel between stars." Senator Karn bristled. "You want to just give them worlds?" "I want to turn a potential threat into an ally," Tor replied. "They need homes. We need buffer zones in outer regions. Their massive ships could serve as mobile defense platforms against external threats. This could be mutually beneficial." "What external threats?" Karn demanded. "Research Director." Miles activated a display showing data the humans had shared. "They've detected signals from beyond our explored space. Faint transmissions from unknown civilizations in the galactic arms we've never surveyed. The humans were heading in that direction, which means we might have new neighbors we don't know about yet." The revelation silenced the chamber. The coalition had grown comfortable in their dominance of known space. The possibility of other civilizations, potentially more advanced, changed calculations significantly. "The humans could be an early warning system," Venn said slowly. "If they establish colonies in those regions, they'll be the first to encounter whatever sent those signals." "Or the first to be destroyed by it," Karn muttered. "Either way, we benefit from their presence," Tor argued. "If they find friends, we gain trading partners. If they find enemies, we have time to prepare, and their ships are formidable enough to slow down any invasion force." Ambassador Cross presented humanity's formal proposals. "We're requesting permission to establish colonies on 7 worlds in the outer systems. In exchange, we offer technical consultation on large-scale habitat construction, agricultural systems proven over decades of ship operation, and educational exchange programs. We also propose a mutual defense treaty. Our ships may be civilian, but they're not defenseless, and we have a vested interest in galactic stability." The negotiations took weeks, lawyers and diplomats arguing over details, but the basic framework emerged quickly. The coalition would grant colony rights to specified worlds. Humans would register all vessels over 100 kilometers and submit to regular inspections. Both parties would share intelligence about the unknown signals from deep space. Cultural liaison programs would prevent future misunderstandings. Senator Karn's faction continued to oppose, but public opinion had shifted. Footage from inside New Horizon had been broadcast across coalition networks. Images of children playing in parks, families gathering for meals, students graduating from universities. The massive ships stopped being threats and became objects of curiosity. One interview went viral. The grandmother Bate had mentioned, recorded weeks before her death. She spoke about leaving Earth as a young woman, about watching her children grow up among the stars, about tending her garden and knowing it would outlive her. People ask why we build so big, she said. It's because we're not just traveling, we're living. This ship is my home, not just a vehicle. I've spent 60 years here, and when I die, my great-grandchildren will still be here, still growing food in soil I helped make, still breathing air I helped clean. That's why we build to last. The emotional resonance cut through political debates and military concerns. These were not invaders. They were migrants, people seeking new lives far from crowded homes. Their massive ships were mobile villages carrying entire communities toward distant hopes. A test of the new partnership came sooner than expected. Coalition colony refuge stations sent desperate transmissions. A stellar anomaly was accelerating, threatening the system with radiation that would sterilize the colony world within months. Evacuation was necessary, but coalition vessels could only transport 40% of the population in the time available. The rest would die. High Arbitrator then contacted Captain Walsh directly. "We have a crisis. We need help." Walsh responded within minutes. "Send us the coordinates. New Horizon can be there in 3 days. We'll take them all." "All 800,000? Ven asked, disbelieving. "All of them," Walsh confirmed. "That's what these ships are for, counselor, helping people. Will make room." The coalition leadership convened emergency session. Some saw opportunity to test human intentions. Others saw desperation forcing cooperation. Ven saw something simpler, a chance to save lives. "Accept their help," he ordered, "and pray they're as good as their word." New Horizon altered course, its massive bulk accelerating toward Refuge Station. The galaxy watched and waited, hoping that first contact would be remembered not for the fear it caused, but for the lives it saved. New Horizon dropped from hyperspace 3 kilometers above Refuge Station, and the colonists below stared upward in wonder and terror. The vessel was so massive it blocked out the sun, casting shadows across entire continents. But within hours, that terror transformed into hope as evacuation shuttles began their endless relay. Captain Walsh coordinated operations from the bridge while his crew worked with military precision. "We can process 10,000 people per hour through the main docking bays," he told Coalition Evacuation Coordinator. "More if we use emergency airlocks, but let's keep it orderly. Panic helps no one." The Coalition had planned a 3-month evacuation using every available vessel. Walsh accomplished it in 8 days. Entire residential districts on New Horizon were converted to emergency housing. Schools became temporary shelters, parks filled with tents and makeshift accommodations, and the human population simply absorbed the refugees without complaint. Ryla volunteered as liaison, helping coalition refugees navigate the massive ship. She found herself explaining to frightened families that, yes, the ship really was this big, and yes, there was plenty of room, and no, they wouldn't be turned out once the emergency passed. One refugee, an elderly man named Farron, stared at the artificial sky with tears streaming down his face. "We thought we were going to die," he said. "We had accepted it, made peace with it, and then this mountain appears in the sky and takes us all, every single one of us." "That's what these ships are for," Bates said, helping distribute supplies. "My grandmother always said we build big so there's room for everyone when it matters most." The operation succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. All 800,000 refugees evacuated with 0 casualties when the stellar event finally occurred. Refuge Station's world was scoured clean by radiation, but its people were safe, scattered across New Horizon's residential districts, receiving medical care, food, shelter, and kindness from strangers who had traveled light years to find new homes. Senator Karn's opposition collapsed overnight. His own constituents had been among the refugees. His recorded statement was brief. "I was wrong. These are not invaders. They are neighbors, and they saved my people when we could not save ourselves." High Arbitrator then addressed the Coalition Assembly. "We faced the unknown and responded with fear. The humans responded with compassion. They could have ignored our crisis. They could have demanded concessions. Instead, they simply helped. This is the foundation upon which lasting alliances are built. The formal treaty was signed 6 months later. 7 worlds allocated for human colonization, cultural exchange programs established, joint exploration initiative funded. What began in panic ended in partnership, and the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Coalition engineers began studying human construction techniques, not to copy them directly, but to understand the principles. Dr. Abrams led a team designing new habitat stations incorporating lessons learned from decades of human experience. "We've been building for efficiency," she explained. "They build for permanence. There's wisdom in both approaches." The first mixed crew exploration mission launched toward the unknown signals. 3 coalition science vessels escorted by 1 human colony ship, smaller than New Horizon, only 80 kilometers long, but still massive by coalition standards. The mission would take years, but for the first time, the coalition was pushing beyond its comfortable boundaries, reaching toward mysteries that might hold friends or dangers. Rilo accepted permanent position aboard New Horizon, her expertise in coalition sensor systems valuable for the navigation and detection. But she stayed for other reasons. The ship felt alive in ways stations never had. With children running through corridors, students debating in cafeterias, artists creating in studios, this was not just a vessel, it was a community. She stood in the observation deck with Captain Walsh 6 months after the evacuation, watching Coalition escort fleet keep pace as they traveled toward the colony world designated as humanity's first settlement beyond Earth. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" she asked. Walsh smiled. "Honestly, no, we expected to find empty space, maybe some ruins from dead civilizations. We never imagined finding a thriving galactic community, and we certainly never imagined they'd be terrified of us." "You have to admit, showing up with ships this size sends a certain message," Rilo said. "A message about engineering philosophy," Walsh replied. "Not military intent, but yes, I see how it looked from outside. We build big because we're scared of being alone. You build efficient because you're secure in your numbers. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different responses to the same existential questions." The coalition refugees had integrated smoothly, most choosing to continue to the colony world rather than return to coalition space. They had tasted life aboard a ship that felt like a world and found it suited them. Families that had lost everything discovered new opportunities. Children who faced death now had futures. Bates' grandmother would never see the colony established, but her garden still grew in the ship's agricultural section, tended now by refugee families who had adopted it, mixing earth plants with species from their home worlds, creating something new from the merger of cultures. The stellar anomaly that destroyed Refuge Station became a turning point in galactic history, the moment when fear transformed into cooperation, when difference became strength rather than threat, when the massive human ships stopped being symbols of invasion and became symbols of hope. Admiral Cross and Captain Walsh formed genuine friendship, meeting regularly to discuss everything from military tactics to cooking techniques. "You know," Cross said during one such conversation, "I spent weeks planning how to fight you, running simulations of combat scenarios I knew we'd lose, feeling helpless against the scale of your vessels." "And now," Walsh asked. "Now I'm grateful you're on our side," Cross said. "The galaxy is bigger than we knew and stranger. Those signals from deep space suggest we're not alone out here. When we meet whatever sent them, I want ships like yours standing with us, not against us." The colony fleet reached its destination, 17 massive vessels settling into orbit around 7 different worlds. The work of building new civilizations began, but this time, humans did not build alone. Coalition advisors helped select optimal landing sites, shared technology for atmospheric processing, contributed expertise earned across thousands of successful colonies. And in return, humans shared the one thing the Coalition had forgotten in their millennia of security, the understanding that safety comes not from isolation but from spreading wide, not from efficiency but from redundancy, not from military might but from having homes in enough places that no single disaster could end everything. The massive ships that caused panic became the foundation of something greater, mobile cities that could respond to crises, transport refugees, establish new settlements in regions too remote for traditional colonization. They were tools of hope rather than weapons of war, and the galaxy was richer for their presence. Ryla watched the first shuttle descend toward the colony world's surface, carrying families eager to walk on soil that wasn't simulated, to breathe air that wasn't recycled, to build homes under real skies. She would miss some of them, but she understood the need to put roots down somewhere permanent. "Will you go down?" Eventually, Walsh asked. "Maybe," Ryla said, "but not yet. I've grown fond of this mountain that travels between stars. There's something comforting about knowing home can move when it needs to." Walsh laughed. "That's very human of you." "Maybe," Ryla agreed. "Or maybe it's just sensible. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders and terrors. Having a mobile city to explore it from seems like wisdom rather than excess." The ships had changed the galaxy, but more importantly, they had changed how people thought about safety and permanence and home. Sometimes the biggest solutions were literally the biggest, and sometimes what appeared as threat was simply a different answer to the eternal question of how to survive in an uncertain universe.